I am incredibly lucky just in terms of the people I have around me. So I've got two of the finest actresses I have ever seen. The performances you get out of people like Leonora Cook and Sarah Coyne are absolutely fantastic, and I'm just so lucky that I was able to use some these tools, these like blobs of paint on my easel. I just got given like ripe fruit for the picking. Okay, and I'm extremely honored to be able to show this film in Belmont. I have always loved Belmont from the days of when I was at uni. Belmont Street, even, is the best street in Aberdeen. It's an absolutely stunning little street, and on that street you had this center point for film culture in the northeast of Scotland that I went to so frequently when I was there. It was actually kind of insane how frequently I went there, and I was part of the RGU Film Society. I was one of the founding members of RGU Film Festival, which was screened there. The first time a film of mine ever was shown in a cinema was at Belmont. It was a short film of mine called Sam that I made when I was part of the BFI Film Academy. It's just incredible to be able to come back to Aberdeen, and what you guys are up to right now with Belmont Cinema is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's very exciting for us to be able to support young Scottish filmmakers. And although we don't quite have the cinema open yet, coming soon, December 27, we're still trying to play our part in the community. Why would any filmmakers stay in Aberdeen or support Aberdeen if there's nowhere for them to show their films? When we're talking about supporting the next generation of filmmakers, existing filmmakers, and when we say the next generation, that doesn't mean they're young. You know, it could be people who decide to do it later in life, whatever it is. But at the moment, where's their outlet? Where are they exhibiting that film? Where are they getting the chance to entice distributors to show their work and to kind of say to the people of Aberdeen, you can do this here, and you do have an outlet for it. So I think as part of the ecosystem of culture and for filmmaking, all of that, I think Belmont is the keystone, the anchor organization. And I do think the third biggest city in Scotland to not have an independent cinema is pretty poor, to be honest with you, which is probably one of the main reasons I'm doing it. It's an important part. And I think the other thing is that when you, as a filmmaker, I'm guessing you watched films in the Belmont that you never saw and you would never see in Cineworld because they're not going to make any money.
No.
So I think there's an element there where you've got to have a cinema so that filmmakers can kind of learn because, I mean, you know, you learn through osmosis as well as through classroom and making. I was watching North by Northwest, and you're looking at some of the shots there, and you're going, "Come on!" And that was what the 50s, the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're like, "How did you actually do that?" And you think probably by breaking a lot of health and safety laws. But
Yeah.
and then perhaps one that's actually more pertinent to yourself would be like Rear Window. You
Yeah.
know, when you're talking about closed situations like your film, and I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I don't want to give any spoilers away for anybody who's watching this before our screening, which you must come and see, is that it is a three-hander. It's all very sort of closed situations, you know, and interestingly, one of them's very open for a closed situation. It'll all make sense when you watch it, I promise. And I think that's a real challenge in itself because although it keeps production costs down, whatever it is, but it gives you a big challenge. And did you find it a challenge to get the dialogue right to make sure that it still felt full and expansive?
That was something we knew from the beginning. We needed to keep it very tight. Certainly for the sections between Rachel and Declan, when he shot this in Mannock Pass, it's in Dumfries and Galloway area, we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. We got the script extremely tight for those sections. made it basically become a play. The sections with Leonora, the character of Stephanie, and Declan in the car were improvised. That was a choice to keep an immediacy and an emotional rawness with the thing, and we shot that first. It was an absolutely breathtaking experience watching Leonora create so much of what Stephanie was in those moments. And people talk about there being a dichotomy between extremely tightly scripted stuff and improvised free stuff. And I think that one of my lessons, it wasn't just something I was wanted to show, it was something that I just discovered as a consequence of making the film, is that there's no dichotomy present there. That this is not a paradox. You can have something that has this freedom. We have a moment where, for example, with Leonora, with Stephanie in the car, where she's saying how she looks terrible and she's not ready to go out to Christmas Day, and I criticize her eyebrows just in that moment. It was just something that I as Declan just threw out there, and her response is this absolutely perfect dismissal of that, and closing up this wing mirror, this little mirror that she's been checking herself out in. Those little moments, those little spark moments, are integral to what that became. And then with my scenes with Sarah Coyne as Rachel, through the rehearsal process, we were able to refine. When we first wrote those highly scripted moments, CJ Lazzaretti and I, my co-writer, and I, were sometimes a bit too overly verbose. We would have a moment of drama that would be 3 or 4 lines, and in the final draft of the script, after we'd done rehearsals with Sarah, we reduced it down to half a line, or if that, just a word even. You could concentrate it down into something that was really there. I love that you mentioned Rear Window there. It's a very, very good example of it. A lot of this stuff kind of comes into the thriller mindset of it. You want things to be interesting. The worst thing you can do is make your camera movement boring. It's films like 12 Angry Men, I would say, is one of the most perfect movies ever made, from the perspective of you don't have very much to work with, but it still keeps you interested by virtue of the way that the cameras are working with those actors in those scenes. Fassbinder did a lot with very little in his work. Films like The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, which is a film which takes place entirely in one room for 2 hours. It feels bigger than any Hollywood film, by virtue of just how much drama is thrown at you in these weird settings. And that was the kind of thing we wanted to capture in Thistle.
Well, what's quite interesting about that is that perhaps if you had asked me before, I might have said that you maybe did some improvisation with the scenes with your sister.
Interesting.
And not the other way round. So it shows how that did inform, the improvised then informed the written to give it the same feeling. So you're absolutely right. So it's an interesting look into the sort of creative process of a filmmaker there. And I can't claim to be that. I'm just somebody who sits there and watches the films. You know what I mean?
So there's sometimes I've got feedback from people and they say to me, say in one of my earlier drafts of a script, earlier cut of a film, I send that cut over to somebody and they say, "Oh, I didn't get that bit, but I'm not really a filmmaker. I don't really understand these things." No, that's I want to know, because you're the audience. You're the audience. That's why you need to tell me these things, because I don't know what The Thistle and the Kiss is about anymore in some ways, by virtue of being the guy that made it. I want to get this out to an audience at a place like the Cowdrey Hall so I can get people to say stuff and respond to it.
And how long did the production take to make then?
In terms of principal photography, it was basically 5 days.
Wow.
So that was 1 day in the car,
Yep.
and then 2 weekends out in Minnoch Pass. Then we did some pickups. There were some shots. We had to prioritize the stuff with the actors.
Yeah.
One of the things about independent filmmaking is if you're light on the ground with your setup, you actually sometimes have more freedom, and you have more freedom to go quickly. We had done a ton of rehearsal, just Sarah Coyne and myself, working on the script and working on our little dynamic, moving around. We were actually rehearsing in a church, using the altar as the cars, going back and forth between each other. We were just using our like theatre of the mind stuff, trying to place ourselves into that space. Then we had one dress run with the cameraman, my DP Callum Mingus, and then just threw ourselves into it. And by the time you actually get to there, we knew our lines, we knew where we were going. Pretty much we were just going full speed through the whole thing. One funny thing was our makeup artist, this brilliant makeup artist called Sama Mamone, he's watching us doing our work, and at one point just kind of says, after Declan says something particularly outrageous, he says, "I hate this guy." There was a bit of theatre going on there because we shot it predominantly in chronological order in Menot Pass, which was great for us really diving into the thing. It meant that by the time we were getting towards some more dramatic moments in the script, we were already fizzing and popping and really, really powering forward with our energies. We were actually taking advantage of some of the tiredness of the thing. We took bigger swings at things because we had less time and because we had fewer resources.
Yeah, sometimes constraints can be a positive, and they lead to, like you say, those choices that you make. And the makeup artist didn't like Declan. I think, like most people, he's a complicated, flawed, complex person with good points and bad points. Like, how would you describe the tone of the film?
It is absolutely a drama, but it does leave you with a few chuckles and a few moments where you're clapping your hand against your face over the stupid antics of these young people.
It was interesting because it made me laugh a few times. And it was also like there were heavier points and stuff. But I think overall, there's a lightness of touch to it that kind of allows it to do what it needs to do in both spaces. And I think with the heavier stuff, that it doesn't excuse some of the behavior, but what it does is it contextualizes it. And I actually thought that was a really nice way to approach it personally, which was, if it had been unremittingly dark, then I think it would have been a tough watch. You know what I mean? So I think having that balance. Am I allowed to say that there is perhaps some bait and switch involved? And would that be fair?
I think that's a fair threading the needle there, Matt. I think that's fair.
I can't believe that you see dead people is what I was really thinking.
Yeah. The moment and the moment that the dead people discover that it's actually the 21st century is amazing.
And then, can you believe that AI has taken over the cyborgs? Unbelievable.
Amazing.
Actually, a lot of that comes down to the performances. And, I think as well that I was saying to you previously that when I came on to speak to you, I said, you and your sister. And that relationship is really great. And then there's the dynamic with your beau as well. And I think that particularly a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the brother-sister relationship. And I think for anybody who's got a sibling, whether it be a sister or a brother, they'll understand that shorthand, that pushing of limits that you can only really do with somebody that you've grown up with and spent a lot of time with. Speaking as somebody who's got two brothers, I recognize that within it. And you never insult anybody quite as brutally as you insult your own family. So,
oh, tell me about it. I don't actually have a sister. I've got an older brother. And he's okay.
Yeah, so as we get towards May the 30th, how excited are you to kind of get the screening on and then get the feedback? Are you a little bit nervous at the same time as being excited, or is it mainly excitement?
There's a funny thing when you have watched a film a million times in an edit where you feel like you could never watch it again. By the time we got to our cast crew screening, which was at the time of our US release, I watched the film again. It'd been a while, and there was a part of me that was thinking, "Oh, I'm going to see all the flaws in it or whatever." I actually ended up just watching it as a viewer for the first time, and I was just enjoying it there and in soaking up the atmosphere of the whole experience. And now I'm able to share it with a room full of strangers directly and get that feedback in a place like Aberdeen, in the Cowdray Hall. When I've seen your other screenings that you've been putting on with the Cowdray Hall with Belmont and how popular they are, what that shows me is more than just like a cliched thing a council member might say and some politician might say. We are starved for artistic communal experiences. We want those things to happen. And
Yeah.
the stuff that you guys are doing there, and to be in some way part of that with Thistle, it's absolutely an honor for us. And I'm just so excited for May 30th to share it with Aberdeen, my old stomping ground.
People in the moment are having to go down to Montrose or Glasgow or Dundee or Edinburgh to see a lot of releases. They're not having access. And what it does is it kills that burgeoning sort of love, because if you've got a friendly local independent cinema, then you're going to take a chance on stuff because you start to trust the curation that we do. You trust the programmer and you say, you know what, I'm going to give that a go. And then you might see something that completely changes your world. We're trying to do as much as we can, but we're limited by, having to hire somewhere else. We are doing screenings in the anatomy rooms as well, which has been interesting. We did Everybody at Kenmure Street there, and that was a brilliant. I know Felipe isn't. I think he could be described as Scottish now because I believe he's got a huge love for Scotland, and it comes through in his films. That's for sure.
I feel that, yeah.
But films like Everybody at Kenmure Street, it wouldn't have been shown in Aberdeen if we hadn't paid to hire somewhere to make sure that people in Aberdeen could watch it. It is so important that people have access and then take chances and watch something they don't normally watch. And what I would say is that, your film's a film that people should take a chance on and come and have a look and then tell you what they think of it afterwards. I did really enjoy it. And I said to you off recording that, by the end of it, I kind of wanted a bit more. I was like, okay, I need to know a little bit more about where this is, but that's not a bad thing, and there could be somebody sitting in that room who's been thinking about making something and they go, right, actually, you know what, I could do this. It can be done and it can be screened. And like I say, I think as well, it's really important that everybody in the northeast of Scotland has access to that. I'm looking forward to it as well. I think it'll be really, really fun to kind of get the feedback as well. So because
100%.
it helps us shape what we program moving forward when we do reopen in December 27. So, I think from my point of view, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the audience, it's a win for you, and it's a win for us.
I cannot wait for the 30th. I cannot wait to show it to Aberdeen. Uh,
Yeah,
so I can't stay away from Aberdeen screens. It must be the granite or something.
yeah. No, it's the radioactive
It's a
in the
radioactive
ground.
granite. I just get pulled in. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Matt. I really
Oh,
appreciate
no
your
worries.
time. I shall see you guys on the 30th, and it's going to be a fantastic showing.